Hello and welcome to The Baker's Show. At Baker's, everyone wins when it comes to saving big. Because when you order online through the Baker's app, you get the same great prices, deals, and rewards on pickup or delivery that you do in-store, with no hidden fees or markups. So no matter how you shop, you'll always save big at Baker's. Baker's, fresh for everyone.
Save big on your favorites with the Buy 5 or More, Save $1 each sale. Simply buy 5 or more participating items and save $1 each with your card. Baker's, fresh for everyone.
You're listening to The Drag.
This podcast contains strong language, references, and descriptions of domestic abuse, violence, and suicide. It also has graphic descriptions of gun violence in schools. Mental health is an important part of this story, so please take care while listening. Previously on this season of Darkness.
All of a sudden I felt like I had stepped on, like I was being electrocuted.
We have a report of shooting at the University of Texas Tower.
Well, I got an ambulance at 24th and Rio Grande. What do you need? I need him at 2310 Guadalupe.
Somebody is shooting from the tower, which had the immediate effect of making us all run to the windows and see what was happening. And that was when we saw people lying on the mall.
Monday, I met Drummond for lunch, and he was coming back from someplace I hadn't eaten.
In the summer of 1966, Bob Higley was working for University of Texas's student body president, Cliff Drummond. Cliff had sent him to meetings in his place, and Bob had planned to catch him up over lunch.
He came in and was stoked up. Sounds to me like there's somebody up in the tower. They're telling me there's somebody up in the tower. And he said, let's go out and see what's happening. So we went down the back stairs to the Student Union building.
Neil Spelse's KTBC radio broadcast had alerted most Austinites about the campus shooting. But Bob hadn't seen what was going on for himself yet. Bob and Cliff walked out the back of the Union, which lets out onto Guadalupe Street, or as students call it, the Drag. The Drag divides the university from West Campus, a student neighborhood. Stores and restaurants catering to the students have lined the street nearly since the university opened in the 1880s. Bob saw something on the Drag that didn't seem quite right.
We looked across the street, and here was this male student propped up against a meter pole. And he's not moving. But there doesn't appear to be anything wrong with him. And the students around us said, he's not moving. We've been calling to him, but he doesn't call back. Drummond looks at me. I look at Drummond. We're off.
I'm Sarah Kinney, and this is Season 4 of Darkness. You're listening to Episode 3. In the last episode, we focused on the stories of those on campus that day. In this episode, we're going to rewind a little bit back to the start of the shooting and focus on the stories of the people who were on the Drag that day. Alec Hernandez rode his bike along the edge of campus. He pedaled across the street from the University Co-op, which is a store on the Drag that sells books and university gear. 17-year-old Alec was delivering the city's newspaper to nearby homes and businesses. On the morning of August 1st, his younger cousin was on the bike with him as they traveled down the Drag. Suddenly, Alec crashed onto his side. He'd been shot. Moments earlier, the sniper had shot Claire Wilson, who was 8 months pregnant, and her boyfriend Thomas Ekman in front of the tower. This was before Neil's radio broadcast, so few people on the Drag at this point were aware of the shooting on campus. Inside the University Co-op building, which is about 150 yards from the tower, Alan Crum saw a crowd gathering on the other side of the road. Crum was a 40-year-old employee of the co-op and a retired Air Force Master Sergeant. KTBC later interviewed him, and the following recordings are from that broadcast.
When I looked out of the co-op windows and saw a boy shot across the street. I went across the street to investigate because I thought it was a small fight, and as I stepped out the door, I heard the sound of shots.
He ran outside and saw the paperboy Alec on the ground, bleeding from a gunshot wound to his leg. While Crum tried to stop the bleeding, he heard more gunshots overhead.
It seemed like they were coming from the building across the street because they were so loud. But as I got out into the center of the street, I could tell they were coming from the tower.
He originally thought the shots were coming from the student union, which was between him and the tower. Crum later said in his report to police that he called over one of the students who had gathered nearby. He told the student to move the newspaper boy Alec under some nearby bushes and gave him instructions on how to stop the bleeding. Alec's cousin stayed with him. Crum ran back across the street and into the co-op, leaving the two boys and the student. He told someone inside to move customers away from the windows and toward the back of the store. Outside the co-op windows, traffic passed by as usual. Most of the drivers were unaware of the danger unfolding around them.
And I noticed down the street that students were trying to get people to stop their cars to keep them from getting in the line of fire.
Crum went outside again, instructing cars to get away from the area. In the midst of directing traffic, he ended up on the opposite side of the drag and found himself on the University of Texas campus, and in eyesight of the tower. A few buildings over, Forrest Preece wrapped up lunch at Rexall Drugstore with his Longhorn band friends. The group went to the front of the store to pay for their meals.
The lady at the check stand said, "You guys better not go out there. Somebody's shooting a gun." We're like, "Oh, yeah, right. Give me a break." So the only thing we could possibly surmise from that was that there used to be a bank down at the south end of the drag, close to what's now MLK, okay, and we thought, oh, the cops must be chasing somebody that has held up the bank. That's the only thing we could possibly think of. They'd involve a gun. So we just trooped right outside, stood outside the drugstore, you know. This is 1966. This stuff didn't happen back then, man.
And when Forrest looked outside, he didn't see anything strange.
Nobody's running around. I looked down the south in front of the co-op, I blocked down south in front of the co-op. There were a few people standing around, but nobody's really panicking or running or anything. And I'm like, why should we be concerned about a gun?
Directly outside the drugstore was a small newspaper stand, displaying the day's paper along with various magazines. The tower could be seen a few blocks in the distance. People continued to walk by as usual.
Then all of a sudden, off in the distance, towards the main mall, we could hear some pops went off like that.
But Forrest and his friends didn't believe it was gunfire.
We said, oh, some fool's got some firecrackers left over from the 4th of July or something like that. And, man, that guy's going to get in a lot of trouble. He's throwing firecrackers on the mall. And so in our infinite wisdom, we decided, well, that must be it, you know.
The group decided to split up. They all walked north on the drag except for Forrest, who turned south.
We all said, oh, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, guys, okay. And I turned around, and I took one step, and my body quit.
He hadn't been shot, but for some reason, he couldn't move.
I've never had a feeling like that in my life, and I'm not making this up, okay? I'm not making this up. My body just shut down. Like, somehow I had some subconscious whatever, it thin-sliced existence or whatever, but maybe I had actually seen the gunman up there, it didn't register or something, but my body quit. I just could not move any further south.
His friends had also stopped in their tracks.
And I turned around. Whatever it was, they felt it too. David and Tom felt something weird too. They quit moving. We all just stood there for about 10 seconds.
38-year-old Harry Walchuk stood just behind Forrest and his friends. He was on his lunch break when he stopped to look at the newsstand's magazines before picking up food. Harry had begun working on his PhD earlier that year. He had previously graduated from the university with his bachelor's degree in 1954. He was a Navy veteran from Minnesota, but now lived in Austin with his wife Marilyn and their 6 children. Forrest and his friends didn't notice Harry standing behind them at the newsstand.
Then all of a sudden, a high-powered rifle bullet went past my right ear. And I know that's the one that hit Mr. Walchuk, Harry Walchuk, who was standing about 4 feet to my right.
The bullet struck Harry in the stomach.
Of course, at that point, we all ran back inside the drugstore. And then somebody had the sense, they had a bunch of little transistor radios inside the drugstore. Somebody turned one on. And by this point, we'd figured they were saying on the radio what was going on. So we knew, okay, there's somebody on top of the tower shooting a gun.
On campus, Jim Bryce walked to meet Sandra Wilson for lunch, just as they had planned the night before on top of Mount Bunnell. Jim waited for Sandra and the student union, watching the TVs overhead. The noon soap operas were just about to start.
And there was some popping. You could hear pop, pop. We didn't think anything about it because there was construction all the time.
Jim was at a table on the union's ground floor. The student union is 2 buildings west of the tower. Students went to the union to study, eat lunch, or catch up with friends, just like they do today. In parts of the building, floor-to-ceiling windows that face the tower overlook an outside patio. That day, Jim watched the TV as it grew closer to noon.
All of a sudden, the black and white television changed, and there were a bunch of us sitting, maybe a dozen or more chairs here, looking at a TV that's up maybe 6 or 8 feet off the floor, whatever it was. The TV changes from the network feed that was a soap opera to an announcer here.
A sniper with a high-powered rifle has taken up a position on the observation deck of the tower on the campus of the University of Texas.
The breaking news broadcast that was heard through radios and televisions across Austin now filled the student union.
We hear reports that there may be somebody shooting for the tower, so everybody stay away from the university, and everybody close to it, take cover. Well, at that point, we all looked at each other and sort of immediately realized we had to stop people from going outside. So all of us started to try to keep people from going outside, and those of us like me who grew up with firearms, deer hunting and all that, knew what you could do with a rifle real quick.
Jim said most people listened to the warnings as the live broadcast continued overhead.
Most of them didn't go out. A few did, out that south door. And I have distinct recollection of one person who was in there, and we said, don't go out and don't look through windows. If you can see him, he can see you.
The union's many windows and proximity to the tower put those inside at risk. One student, 18-year-old John Scott Allen, wanted to get a look at the tower.
That person walked up the steps in the union that would go up to the second floor where the ballroom is and was looking out a window. He was not killed, but he did get shot in the arm.
Jim continued to try to keep people inside and away from the windows.
We just sat there transfixed. And we would see the smoke, we'd hear the fire, the shot, and then we'd hear it again on the TV. I guess there was that kind of a delay. But they had a camera on it all the time, which was a lifesaver. I want to emphasize that. It was a lifesaver that the TV people got cameras on the tower to really bring it home.
Jim stayed in the union as the shooting continued outside.
It's just so terrifying to me because normally I would have been crossing that mall at that time. I was just a few minutes behind.
While Jim and the other students hid in the union, student body president Cliff Drummond and his assistant Bob Higley were just outside on the drag. They were trying to figure out how to help an injured man across the street without getting shot themselves.
There's a shooter in some area over the top of us that's high up. I didn't know where he was. We didn't know how many there were. We didn't know anything. We didn't know if there was someone down Guadalupe on the south shooting north, someone on the north shooting south, east or west. We didn't know if this was a concerted effort. We didn't know anything. And from the report of the rifle, you couldn't tell because the sound resounded off the buildings.
And the heat of the August day didn't help.
The ground's hot, but we're going to be going across asphalt. Asphalt is not only hot, it's sticky. It's sort of a very sticky napalm. If it gets on you, it's going to burn you, and you don't want it to get on you.
Cliff's shoes stuck to the ground.
Drummond then looks down, and he has no shoes that he can run in. He's got a pair of Mexican, we had a name for them. They were cheap leather top, cheap leather bottom, one thin sole. So going across that street in these sandals, thin, cheap sandals, is going to limit his mobility. And if the shooter picks up on him, that's not good news. That's bad news.
Bob realized Cliff couldn't run in his sandals.
So I had a bright idea. First bright idea of the day. I said, I got an idea. Take my socks. And I peeled off what I was wearing, which were what we called desert boots. They were pigskin, came up to the ankle, cheap, and they had a rubber sole. And I wasn't giving my shoes. I'm an Army brat. I don't give up my shoes. Not going barefoot. And I stripped off my shoes, gave him my socks. He got his socks on first. So he took off across Guadalupe.
Cliff ran away from the side of the Union and toward the drag.
And the second that he broke the cover of the Union building, the shooter picked up on him and followed him, trailed him all the way down, shooting at him as he went.
Cliff ran toward the street as Bob Higley laced up his shoes. Shots rained down behind Cliff.
Drummond dropped in to this notch between these two cars and moved to the left, got behind a car. Well, by that time, I had my shoes on, and I came out at a different angle. Shooter picked me up. And as you ran, and I was swifter than I am now, you noticed that where you were leaving, the shadow where you were leaving, you were getting activity over there. So you were there a moment before, but you're not there now, but there's the bullet. So he's just a step behind you. He's going to account for that.
Cliff crouched behind a car parked on the drag, hiding him from the sniper's view. Bob followed Cliff's trail. Bob worried he would be hit since the sniper could see the path he was taking. Suddenly, the shots stopped.
Second great idea of the day, probably saved my life. I thought, okay, be the guy in the tower. What's he up against? He's got a moving target, and he watched Drummond go through the notch. He's quit shooting. He's not reloading. He's aiming at the notch. He's going to let me fill the notch for him, and when he does, he's going to plunk me. He's going to plant me right there. I'm not doing that. I'll get this. I'm going to outfox him. So as I got to the notch, I faked to the left towards the notch, and then picked up speed and belly landed on top of the hood of the car.
Bob slid over the top of the car, swinging his legs around and landing on the pavement below. Cliff came up behind him, and the pair ducked behind the same parked car.
And as I get there, all of a sudden, the shooter unloads what was left, I suppose, in his clip.
Farther north on the drag, Sandra Wilson headed to the student union to meet Jim for lunch, unaware of the shooting.
And I heard noises. I heard like firecrackers.
Suddenly, she felt like something slammed into her.
It was like a tank.
She fell to the ground. She had no idea what had happened to her.
After I got knocked down, I didn't know what it was. Something that came from the sky, and I thought, you know, some kind of outer space. I didn't know what it was. Something had knocked me down and paralyzed me, and at that time I couldn't move at all.
The bullet hit Sandra's arm and went into her chest, grazing her spinal cord.
You know, but then after a few minutes I realized I'd been shot. And I remember praying and asking God to let me live.
She fought to stay conscious. Just the night before, she had talked with her friend Jim on Mount Bonnell. She had told him her doubts about the police. But as she laid on the hot cement, Sandra asked for the police's help.
You know, after that, I guess I was conscious and then not conscious. I don't know. It's hard to say for sure. But I remember a lot of, waiting. And I remember saying, call the cops.
When you download the Baker's app, you have easy access to savings every day. Get the most out of weekly sales and receive personalized coupons to save on your favorite items, all while earning 1 fuel point for every $1 spent. Baker's makes it easy to save while you shop, whether it's in-store or online, so you get the most value out of every trip, every time. Download the Baker's app now to save big on your next purchase. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Must have a digital account to redeem offers. Restrictions may apply. See site for details.
Earlier that day, Paul Bolton Sontag and Claudia Rett were shopping at the stores along the drag. They were both 18 years old and recent high school graduates, and they were dating. Claudia wore both of their class rings on a necklace. They lived in Austin, but both planned to move away to attend college that fall. Paul planned to go to Colorado University, while Claudia had committed to Texas Christian University. That summer, Paul had worked as a lifeguard, as he had for the past 2 summers. He had just picked up his paycheck before going to meet Claudia. The two parked across the street from Snyder Chenard's, a clothing store near the Co-op bookstore. Out front, construction barriers partially blocked the walkway. The couple started to cross the street. They ran into their former high school classmate, Carla Sue Wheeler. The three stopped to talk. The Austin American newspaper later reported what happened with the trio. The couple, Paul and Claudia, and their former classmate, Carla, heard a loud noise, but they disagreed on where it came from. Paul thought it was a car backfire, while Carla thought it was a gunshot. They didn't know what was happening at the tower. A stranger told them to take cover as a bullet passed by them. They hid behind the construction barricades. Moments later, Paul stuck his head out. He told his friend Carla that he could see the sniper. Just then, he fell backward. A bullet had gone through his mouth. Claudia reached out for her boyfriend Paul. Carla tried to hold her back behind the barricade, wrapping an arm around her chest. Another shot rang out. The bullet went through Carla's left hand and into Claudia's chest. On campus, KTBC News reporter Neil Spels continued his broadcast as he watched the scene unfold around him.
And he would walk around all 4 sides of the tower with a high-powered rifle with a sniper scope and look down over the top of the tower, pick his target, boom, and fire, and then go around and find another one and shoot and start hitting. I don't think there was any obstruction except buildings and trees.
The sniper could see everyone below since there was little covering, and those on the ground could also see him.
So the police officers, several of them, went home and got their deer rifles with sniper scopes on them to accurately reach and see several citizens. I was standing there broadcasting, shots going on everywhere around, and I look kind of off to the side to my shoulder, and I see this guy running up beside me, dressed in a khaki shirt and jeans, and he's carrying a rifle.
This is Texas, so plenty of students owned guns. Many didn't have to go farther than their dorms or apartments to arm themselves.
And it turns out it was some guy brought his deer rifle from home and came in, average citizen, and started shooting at the tower. Once that happened, maybe 12:20, 12:25, somewhere along in there, when they started firing back.
It's like a battle scene. It's like, there's another shot and another shot. There are 2 different kinds of shots. Apparently police are returning the fire now, which means there's a danger of ricocheting bullets off the university tower. But we heard 2 different reports. One, a heavy caliber sounding weapon, which apparently was a rifle, and then another lighter caliber sound, which could be police returning fire. We are not sure that the police are returning the fire, but we do hear the shots, and we do hear the 2 different reports.
The sniper moved around the tower, seeking targets.
We now have a report. He is definitely under the clock on the south side. Yes, we can see the movement. Under the clock on the south side of the University of Texas Tower, and police are returning the fire. There's no report as to who this man may be, or what he's doing up there, or what prompted this apparent madness. But the man is located on the University of Tower observation deck below the clock, which now shows 12:25, and is shooting. He's shooting our direction. We just saw a puff of smoke. He fired again.
If you watch video footage from that day, you can see what looks like puffs of smoke. The tower was built with limestone, which is a very soft rock. When people fired back at the sniper, their bullets hit the limestone, and the limestone would break, causing the appearance of smoke.
The clock now shows 12:32, and he's coolly and calmly sitting up there firing away. Quick shots fired, and police are returning the gunfire, but of course this is a tricky situation. He's hidden. The balustrades of the university tower are such that he is able to sit back and just lean up, just exposing a small portion of his body, lay his rifle over the edge and fire. The shots were fired, again, with large puffs of smoke preceding the sound. The distance, I'd say, from where we're broadcasting is about a block. Another shot was just fired, a heavy report.
Neil kept his eyes on the sniper.
We're standing here in an alley located just south of the tower, where we can see the area from which he's moving now. We can see him moving. He's bending over and crouching and moving around toward the west side of the building.
On the other side of the drag, Forrest Priest hid in the drugstore with his Longhorn band friends. Soon his friends decided to run onto campus.
They ran across the street to the student union. I was not getting outside that drugstore. I said, somebody's firing a gun. It's people on the drag. There's no way I'm getting outside this drugstore, okay? That's where I stayed.
Forrest watched his friends cross the drag.
At one point, I really need to use the restroom, okay, so that coke was going through me, man. So I asked the druggist if I could, they had a little restroom in the pharmacy section there. He said, oh, sure.
At the back of the store was a door that led to a parking lot.
As I'm going past to the restroom, he had the back door open. I could see a couple of guys, looked 30-something guys in kind of office garb, white shirts and ties. They both had rifles strapped to them, and they were running across the porch of the Pie Fi house over there. And somebody was yelling at them, stay down, guys, stay down, like that. Yeah. But that's a whole other story, is that a lot of people, guys especially, around town that had deer rifles, a lot of students had deer rifles in their dorm rooms back then. They just all got them out and started firing back.
The students and others who came to campus continued to fire back at the sniper.
After he started getting return gunfire, he wasn't nearly as effective. He got most of his kills in the first 10, 15 minutes. After that, he was having to use the drain pipes to shoot through. When he was unopposed by return gunfire, he was able to get right up over the top of the observation deck. And he had all the time he needed to aim, Well, after they kept him down, at least he was not as effective.
Back on the drag, Bob and Cliff crouched against a parked car. The bullets flew over their heads, striking a stack of bricks. Across the street, the pair could see Snyder Chenard's. That's the clothing store where the young couple, Paul and Claudia, had been shot when Paul peeked around a construction barricade. At the time, Bob and Cliff didn't know who the young man leaning against a construction pole was. But Bob later learned his name.
Paul Sontag, we're going to give him a name. That's his name. Was resting against this pole. And I looked at him, and I swear to you, I saw no blood. I didn't get it. I thought, well, you've been hit in the head. Knocked out. I reached up and I pulled him down.
Before I continue on to the next quote, I'd like to warn you that what you're about to hear is graphic. It's a part of this episode because I want you to understand that what happened was real life. And it's important to share how the horror of that day continues to impact the people who experienced it. Please skip ahead a minute if you'd prefer not to listen to a detailed description of the scene at the construction site.
And when I pulled him down, his head came forward and he cratered literally right in front of my face, like right here. And his mouth fell open, and it was a gruesome scene. And it produced, the heat produced a ball of liquid, you can fill in the blank, right in front of us, sort of like those jellyfish you see on the beach, stranded on the beach. And Drummond said, his hands are cyanotic.
Paul's fingertips had turned blue due to a lack of oxygen.
Which meant that the blood was all running back into the core of the body, try to keep it alive. If you get cold, your body returns to the center.
By the time Bob and Cliff got to Paul's body, Paul's girlfriend Claudia and their classmate Carla were nowhere to be seen. Bob said he believes Claudia had been moved into one of the nearby shops. Bob and Cliff stayed with Paul.
We're now stuck with a mortally wounded Paul Sontag. And what do we do next? Well, at that moment, this hearse pulls onto is driving, apparently driving on the sidewalk. He runs right as close as he can to the parked car, jumps the curb, comes over to the wrong side of Guadalupe, where he can gain protection, some protection from the overhang of the Union building, and stops.
On the other side of the street, the man who drove the hearse pulled an expandable gurney out of the back.
I'd never seen a gurney before, but it was a gurney. You know a gurney. So out comes a gurney, pops open, wheels it over to us. So we pick up this body and start trying to move it. Well, all the blood has run to, he's sitting up, so it's run to his bottom or his legs. So he is literally dead weight. And it's like trying to move a 180-pound gunny sack of wet sand.
Cliff and Bob struggled to carry Paul across the street. They knew they were out in the open.
It's very, very difficult. You get no help. He's totally relaxed. So we're struggling, trying to keep him from, trying to avoid dropping him, because it's slowing us down. Every minute we're out there, we're totally exposed, and we're not moving. We're standing targets.
The hearse driver saw the pair struggling and pushed the gurney closer to them. Now he too was in the sniper's sight.
We put him on the gurney. We take him back to the back of the hearse. The guy opens the door. We push it in. We close the door, and he screams down Guadalupe, never see us again. Don't know who he was.
Cliff and Bob were now on the campus side of the drag again. They sheltered by the student union.
Drummond and I now are trapped back where we started, literally within yards of where we started.
Around them, students continued to fire back at the tower. That meant more people could now help those who had been hit. In the safety of Rexall drugstore across the street, Forrest Priest could see all this outside the store's windows.
This big, kind of bulky dude in a black outfit came running across from the student union west across the drag, rolled up behind some parked cars. And he's just wild with fright because he's afraid he's going to get shot. God bless him for doing what he did. But he's waving, at somebody inside the newsstand. Of course, it dawns on me then, oh my God, somebody got shot inside the newsstand. I didn't know he'd gotten shot. All I did was hear the bullet go past my ear,
He watched as the men outside approached where he had been standing just 30 minutes earlier.
And here came two guys in white jackets running with a stretcher. We had Mr. Walchuk on it, and an ambulance pulled right up. They got him on the thing, got him out of there. Of course, now I'm feeling like a total jerk for not helping.
Forrest stayed, sheltering with the other people inside the drugstore.
All I could do is keep him quiet. I mean, there's not much you can do about. You sure can't, do compression or anything on an abdominal wound. That's going to make things worse.
Forrest watched people running out into the street.
That's another thing that just really sticks with me, how brave those people were to get out there.
In 1966, 911 didn't exist. There wasn't a national emergency number people could call. If you needed help back then, you had to call the local police operator, the fire station, or the hospital through their own individual numbers. Or you could dial 0 and ask the operator to connect you.
The number you had to call was like 478-4375 or something like that. It wasn't even really a memorable number. Really, I mean, 911 you can remember, but this was just random numbers. I mean, it wasn't even, you could at least have been 2222 or something, that you could instantly think of. Luckily, they usually put that on the very front of the yellow pages or the phone book in case of emergency call, this number. But I'd be willing to bet 90% of the people in Austin back then wouldn't know that number off the top of their head without looking at something, That's how you got an ambulance back then.
This podcast is sponsored by Curology.
Sometimes it would almost hurt to look in a mirror.
Do you struggle with skincare issues that keep you feeling self-conscious and less than who you want to be?
I thought I'd have to live with this all my life, but then I found Curology.
With Curology, a personalized prescription formula is selected specifically for your skin by a licensed dermatology provider.
I could do it all online. and the products are sent right to my door.
Whatever your issues, acne, dark spots, clogged pores, fine lines, rosacea, and much more, Curology's science-based personalized prescription skincare can help treat it.
Curology didn't just clear up my skin. It changed my life.
Now get up to 6 skincare products free, up to a $52 value with free shipping, and a no-cost consultation with a licensed dermatology provider when you go to Curology.com. Go to Curology.com for this free offer. That's Curology.com. Prescription products are excluded from free product offer. Applies only to your first box. Subject to consultation. New subscribers only. See Curology.com for full details.
When you download the Baker's app, you have easy access to savings every day. Get the most out of weekly sales and receive personalized coupons to save on your favorite items, all while earning 1 fuel point for every $1 spent. Baker's makes it easy to save while you shop, whether it's in-store or online, so you get the most value out of every trip, every time. Download the Baker's app now to save big on your next purchase. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Must have a digital account to redeem offers. Restrictions may apply. See site for details.
Across the street, Bob and Cliff figured out their next plan. They saw people hiding behind the cars parked along the drag and decided to help them.
We cut back across Guadalupe and start working our way down and picking largely girls who have sought cover behind cars to see how they are. Are you getting any water? Where are you? And they're some are incoherent, some are weeping, some are, you can just look at them and see how scared they are. They're not here. They're not here. But they're here. And we don't know how long they've been out there. So we start moving them back in to cover.
Some people wanted to be moved. Others didn't. Cliff and Bob moved some of them into the shops across the street as they worked their way along the trail of parked cars. Those in safer areas rolled water bottles across the drag toward the people behind the cars. Bullets weren't striking the path directly behind them anymore. Bob realized that people had started firing back at the tower.
Our shooters, our marksmen, our rifle team, who are returning fire. They've gone back to the fraternity house, they've gone to their pickups, they've gone to their cars, and they've gotten their deer rifles. And they pick up a box of shells. And they are returning fire. And they've got scopes. They take their iron sights and just pick a drain pipe, pick anything that moves, and shoot it.
Bob and Cliff figured out a system for when to run out onto the street. They waited to hear the guns firing back at the tower.
So when it's noisy, it's a no, don't go. When it's quiet, just after it's been noisy, we move the girls from where they are into the Cadeau and drop them off. They are no longer in need of our team. We clean that up as best we can. And some that are out there just waiting till it's over. They don't know how long it's going to last, but they're not leaving. But there's not that 2,000-yard stare that you don't want to see.
The two dropped off another person in a store. This time, they decided to go out the back door of the shop instead of the front.
We dropped down behind the Cadeau. As you recall, I've got on rubber-soled shoes, and Drummond has socks. But you know what's in the alley behind the Co-op and all of those stores along the drag between 24th and the Co-op. Broken glass. Drummond takes one step and lets out a scream.
The glass pierced through Cliff's socks.
So he steps on glass. And I mean, not a little shard of glass. He steps on a broken beer bottle.
Since Cliff had no shoes, Bob had another idea.
Jump up. Can you jump up? No, I can't rest on this foot. Fine. When I lean down, you get up. Well, where are we going? I said, just get up. So I got him up. He grabs hold. It's piggyback.
Bob carried Cliff and set him on top of a concrete barrier.
And I set him on a wall in the back, and I take the shards of glass out of his feet. Now he's got blood in his feet.
While Cliff pulled the remaining glass shards out of his feet, Bob decided to wander a bit. He saw a few people near the shops returning fire at the tower. Relief flooded through him.
They have weighed in. And I'm so happy I can hardly stand it.
A news truck came down one of the alleys behind him, and a reporter stepped out.
And a guy sticks a microphone in my face. Said, "We've been watching you dodge bullets out there. What's it like? Tell us." And I'd like to rewind this part of my conduct on that day, and I thought, if you've been watching what we're doing, just report it. Don't ask me what it's like. Feelings are not facts. I got to get through with this, and you're slowing me down. This is ridiculous. You're selling airtime, and I'm doing something that I think could be really important to somebody. I didn't say that to him. I didn't lecture it, but I was not happy.
With the microphone in his face, Bob told the reporter his name. The reporter asked again what it was like out there. Just so we're clear, I don't know who that reporter was, and I haven't seen this footage.
And I told him. I said, it's a little slice of hell out there. Of course, his eyes got about as big as 50-cent pieces, and he looks at the guy that's managing it, and the guy shrugs his shoulder like, it's already gone now. But you're not supposed to talk like that on the radio, okay? You're not in that day and age. You didn't talk like that.
Bob left the reporter and returned to Cliff. The two looked out onto the drag. They saw people still huddled under the protection of cars. But Bob knew they weren't going to move until the shooting had stopped.
I'm emboldened at that point. So where do we go next? So I go back. Drummond says, well, we came to put an end to this. My words, not his. Let's go up to the tower.
But by the time the pair made it to the tower, the shooting had stopped. Next time on Season 4 of Darkness.
It's a bizarre scene. It's a rare sight. A campus that earlier today was filled with the normal students, shirt sleeves, going to their summer school classes in the morning, and now there are students in their shirt sleeves lying prostrate on the ground in the grass on the sidewalks, dead or seriously wounded, unable to move, and no help able to get to them.
And the man came out, and he had a pair of white women's shoes, and they were bloody. And he said, let me have your gun and I'll go shoot that SOB. He has killed my whole family.
In this episode, I focused on the lives of the people on the drag that day in 1966. I can't fit every story in, but want to recognize and remember those lost in this tragedy. So here is a list of everyone else injured or killed that day and what I do know about them. Carla Sue Wheeler, the high school graduate who was shot while hiding with Paul Bolton Sontag and Claudia Rett on the drag, was taken to the hospital. She had lacerations on the middle 3 fingers of her left hand, but she recovered. Thomas Ray Carr was a 24-year-old Arlington State College honors student. He was originally from Fort Worth. He'd spent a few years in the Army stationed in Taiwan. In 1966, he planned to transfer to the University of Texas in the fall. He wanted to major in Latin American studies, which wasn't offered at his current university. In order to get ahead, he had enrolled in classes at the University of Texas that summer. He wanted to join the State Department and move to South America after he graduated. On August 1st, he had finished his Spanish quiz early and decided to head home. As he walked on the drag, he found Karen Joan Griffith injured and lying near Shefdall's jewelry store. Karen was a 17-year-old high school student. A bullet had gone through her right arm and into her chest, hitting both of her lungs. As Thomas went to help Karen, he too was shot. The bullet struck the left side of his back, leaving him and Karen lying on the drag. They were both eventually driven to the hospital. Thomas died in the ICU that afternoon, while Karen survived surgery that day but struggled to breathe afterward. Her right lung needed to be removed during surgery, and her left lung was damaged. She died in the ICU a week after the shooting. 23-year-old David Mattson, 21-year-old Roland Elke, and their friend Tom Herman, whose age is unknown, were also Peace Corps volunteers. Like Thomas Ashton, they were headed to the Student Union for lunch that day with the other Peace Corps volunteers. The university was hosting 76 volunteers before they headed off to Iran in the fall to teach English. David was from Minneapolis, Minnesota, while Roland was from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. While walking in front of Shefdall's jewelry store on the drag, David checked the time on his watch. Suddenly, a bullet went through his right wrist. The bullet's shrapnel hit Roland in the arm and leg since he was walking beside David. Then, a second bullet came their way and cut through Roland's other arm. Tom Herman was also injured at this time. Inside Shefdall's jewelry store, the 64-year-old manager, Homer J. Kelly, saw that they were injured. He went out to help the trio and bring them inside the shop. Once they were inside, a bullet shattered the store's front window. Homer's leg was injured in the commotion, either from glass or the bullet. All four later recovered. 21-year-old Lana K. Phillips was a music major at the University of Texas and a member of the Longhorn Singers choir group. That summer, she worked at a dress shop on the drag. On August 1st, she was standing just outside the store when she was shot in her right shoulder. After she was shot, she had difficulties playing the organ, which had been the center of her studies at the university. So she began studying music education instead. After years of teaching, she eventually founded a children's singing group called the Austin Children's Repertoire Company in 1985. 35-year-old Billy Snowden taught at the Texas School for the Deaf and was the school's head basketball coach. He went to get a haircut at a shop on the drag. He was shot in his left shoulder while standing in the barbershop doorway. He later recovered. 30-year-old Morris Homan managed the Hilton Manor funeral home. During the shooting, he helped move one victim on campus to the hospital successfully before going out to help others. He parked along the drag near the co-op and went to help another victim when he was shot in his right leg. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital, with part of that stay in the ICU due to the large amount of blood he lost. He ultimately recovered. Dolores Ortega was a 30-year-old elementary education graduate student. She was originally from San Antonio. During the shooting, she was injured when broken glass cut the back of her head. Marina Martinez and her daughter Della Martinez had traveled to Austin from Monterrey, Mexico. Both were injured when they were hit by shell fragments, but later recovered. Student Robert Freed from Kansas City, Missouri was shot and treated at the hospital. Austin resident F.L. Foster was shot and treated at the hospital. 25-year-old Miguel Solis was treated at the hospital for unknown injuries. C.A. Stewart was from Baytown, Texas, and was treated at the hospital for unknown injuries. Billy Bedford was taken to the hospital, but left before being treated. This season of Darkness is reported, written, and hosted by me, Sarah Kinney. Heather Stewart is this season's producer, sound designer, and editor. Katie Penchikautka and Robert Quigley are the executive producers. This podcast is presented by the Drag Audio Production House, which is part of Texas Student Media at the University of Texas at Austin's Moody College of Communication. The associate producers are Jade Emerson, Liv Gamble, Cameron Greiser, Mackenzie Matwick, Ashley Miznazi, Marissa Green, MJ Tilton, Guido Palufo, Liam Quigley, Aurora Berry, and Jeannie Sanchez. The cover art was created by Alexa Georgelos. Sophia Vargas Karam is the drag's marketing and communications manager. Thank you to the Austin History Center, Neil Spels, and the LBJ Presidential Library for help with the archival audio tapes. Special thanks to the University of Texas School of Journalism and Media and Texas Student Media. Also to Jay Bernhardt, Rachel Davis Mercy, David Reif, and Gerald Johnson. A huge thanks to Leslie Schrock for all her support and guidance. The Drag is a nonprofit educational organization that is made possible by individual donations. Please support our work by going to thedragaudio.com/donate. Every dollar goes directly to producing more content like this, while giving students an amazing educational experience. Thank you.
When you buy Kroger brand products, you feel like you're winning. That's because they offer proven quality at lower than low prices. In fact, we guarantee that you and your family will love how Kroger brand products taste, or you get your money back. So next time you're shopping for the family, look for delicious Kroger brand products, because they'll make you all feel like you're winning. Shop now, in-store, or online. Bakers, fresh for everyone.